There is a sentiment in American politics that I believe is possibly one of the most damaging aspects, and that is if you're not right-wing MAGA, then you must be a leftist Democrat, or if you're not left, then you must support the Republicans on the right. And that's just simply not true. I and many other free-thinking individuals think that that belief is only beneficial to those at the top. And I'm not only talking about billionaires and CEOs, I'm talking about those in power that want the status quo to remain the same, more or less, Democrat and Republican. Case in point being why we saw so many centrist Democrats, which is basically a Republican in blue, not endorse Zoran Mamdani, the progressive candidate, during his mayoral race in New York. Because these folks want the status quo to remain the same. They don't want to see major change and a push for workers' rights and universal health care for every citizen, because that would mean a little less money in their pockets and a little less funding from their donor class. Now, as unfortunate as that sentiment is, we do need to get people in power that will at least keep a sane environment and not try to go on full-on fascist murder sprees for the sake of it or because their tiny little ego was hurt. So, as the midterms and the next election roll around, we do need to replace all of the Republicans with Democrats across the board, but that doesn't mean that we don't keep pushing. Because although those folks aren't going to unleash a massed army on its citizens or do anything crazy like that, these are the same folks that continue selling weapons to Israel and continue feeding the military-industrial complex to enrich themselves and their buddies. And that's not right. Clearly, there was a lot of support lost during the election between Kamala Harris and he who must not be named as a direct result of Joe Biden's refusal to stop selling weapons to Israel, knowing what those weapons were going to be used for. And whether those folks just didn't vote or they voted right, I believe that could have been what swayed the election. And we might be living in a different America right now. So that being said, that's why I do believe we do need to get at least somewhat grounded, sane, rational people back in the seats of power, in the presidency and the House and the Senate. That way, at least we have some solid ground to work from. I also think general strikes like the one we just saw in Minnesota recently are going to be incredibly important when that shift happens. Not only because the folks on the blue team are just as embedded in this financial system that benefits the ultra wealthy more than the general populace, but because the country as a whole will likely be much safer and much easier to make these things happen. We won't have to worry about masked thugs trying to squash dissent with lethal force as we are right now. But I fear that we might get comfortable when that change happens. So I'm just saying it's going to be just as important to stage walkouts, to stage boycotts when the Democrats come back into power, because major change needs to happen for this country to get back on track, if it's ever been on track. I don't know. We saw 7 Democrats support the funding bill in the House recently, and that's not by coincidence. 7 was the exact number they needed to push it through the House, and all of those folks were in safe seats or not seeking re-election. And if you think that Chuck Schumer had nothing to do with that, or Hakeem Jeffries had nothing to do with that, you're sadly mistaken. But then we'll see Chuck Schumer do a video from his office dropping the F-bomb.
Kristi Noem and Stephen Miller are liars.
And vehemently speaking against this regime like he's ever really put up a fight. Come on, wake up, people. And I know this is nothing new, but we need to follow the money and vote with your dollar. Because sadly, the savior of the left, Bernie Sanders, has 3 homes. I don't agree with that at all. Talking about oligarchy, but then you own 3 homes. Pick a team, my dude. So when the tides turn, and they inevitably will, we cannot take our foot off the gas. We need to push probably even harder because we'll have less other wild shit to focus on, and we can really put pressure on these companies that are not paying their fair share. We have to keep pushing for workers' rights, keep pushing for universal health care, and keep pushing for a living wage. There is no reason that the minimum wage should be stuck at $7.25 nationally. It doesn't make sense. CEOs certainly haven't felt that pain. And I don't think we should be feeling it either. We only got to this point because of rampant greed on both sides of the aisle, red and blue. We just can't allow business as usual when America as a whole stops feeling like a war-torn nation. We have to keep pushing and we have to keep fighting for a more equitable way of life for the average American, period. And that goes on to my last point of this video, that unfortunately a lot of people on the left believe that Gavin Newsom is going to come and save us. Newsflash, he's not. Any politician that wants to shut down discussion on insider trading needs to go. These are bad people. These are greedy people. These are people that are using their seat of power to enrich themselves and their families, and probably their friends. That goes for Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom, and the list could go on. And the reason I don't mention Republicans because basically all Republicans are bad right now. And I know there's a few speaking up a day late and a dollar short, but they're doing it. So whoop-de-doo. But I don't have to go down the list of Republicans because we can mostly all agree that these are not good people, and they've already shown us that over the past 10 years. The reason I mentioned Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom and only them is because those are the only two politicians that I've seen during interviews with a press junket that have actively shut down questions about insider trading.
Over the course of your career, has your husband ever made a stock purchase or sale based on information he received from you?
No. Absolutely not. Okay, thank you.
Wrong. It's no coincidence that folks like this outperform the stock market and outperform some of the best investors this country has ever seen, like Warren Buffett. Do you think Nancy Pelosi is an economic genius? No. And if you don't share that sentiment, that that's wrong of them to do that, then I'll just say this. If they were to share the information that they're privy to in those backdoor meetings with us, the American public, or they got caught sharing it with their friends and family, it would instantly become illegal. Ask Martha Stewart. So I'll wrap this video up on that point. If you want to see change in this country, vote for people like Kat Abba-Ghazaleh and keep people like Maxwell Frost in power. And God bless Zoran Mamdani. Because we need to see some change in this country. And although I've gotten pretty much used to store brand groceries, I'd like to go back to being able to buy cookies without having to check the price. Thanks for listening. There is...